introducing. All right. Good evening, everybody. Our demonstrator tonight is a fellow club member and youth chair, Don Prorak, and I'm going to turn it over to Don and let him tell us what he's going to do tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess that's on. Getting a little ring here. Probably a bunch of you are wondering, what the hell is he doing up there? And believe me, I'm right there with you. Yeah, my name's Don Prorak. I've been a member of the club for 5 or 6 years now. And so the main reason I am up here is, as Pat mentioned earlier, I got a grant last year to go study with Keith Goschel, who's a phenomenal turner. And so this is kind of my payback to the club for giving me that grant. And Keith, I wanted to work with Keith for 2 reasons. One, he is a really, wonderful turner, very creative guy, really nice guy, and I had met him and all this. And also because I admired his teaching style, and I thought that that would help me in my work as the youth chair for this group. So for those 2 reasons, I wanted to go work with Keith. And I would highly recommend, if anybody's looking for a workshop to go to, try to set something up with Keith. He has a wonderful workshop down in Salida. Salida's a nice town to visit. And I certainly learned a lot from him. He's a very, very thorough teacher and very patient, which is also important. But I'd highly recommend working with Keith. And I also want to say a little bit about, thanks to this club, because I haven't been really turning for that long. Well, I should correct that. I started turning a long, long time ago with having no idea whatsoever what I was doing. And actually, I came down here to meet Bruce Perry one time because he was teaching a class at Rockler, and I thought, well, I've been turning for a while. I don't need a beginning class. And then I went and talked to Bruce, and I showed him some of my work, and I could see how hard he was struggling to say something nice about it. And then I decided to take his beginning class, and I discovered that I absolutely needed a beginning class. I didn't have a clue what I was doing at that point. And now maybe I have a little bit of a clue. But yeah, thanks so much to Bruce. He's taught me an awful lot of what I know today. And and thanks to everybody all the great demonstrators I've seen here, and also at the symposium So at the symposium I've seen so many great demonstrators up there too. Had so many chances to take classes with various people. There's Alan. He's still here. Yeah. So please take advantage of all those opportunities. Now, what I'm going to demonstrate today is not something I learned in Keith's workshop, but I'll hopefully throw in some of the things that I did learn along the way. About 3 years ago, I saw a video on YouTube of a demonstrator from the Gwinnett Woodworkers in Atlanta. I think his name was Frank Bowers. I don't know anything about him. But he was demonstrating a tri-corner bowl very similar to what Jimmy Clues made for us last year. And so I got fascinated with that form, and I think the first thing I made was just a very simple tri-corner bowl, and then I made some things like, this is a tea light holder. I tried turning them around backwards, put the tri-corners on the bottom, and I also then made a tri-corner bowl with a lid and a tri-corner handle. And I think I spent a lot more time on that little handle than I did on the bowl. But every time I turned those things, I kept wondering about those other corners that I was turning away and what I could do with those. And to be honest, I can't imagine that other people haven't done it. But I know Ken Rollins has done it here. But I haven't found anything on YouTube or any references to it, except for one guy in England a couple of years ago I found, and I can't find that one anymore. So I decided to try turning what I'm calling a double tri-corner, and this was the first one that I made. This was also a tea light holder, and keeping all of those corners. Those are the corners from a cube. And how many people have turned tri-corners? I would think a lot. Okay. When we do this, we're mounting a block like this. We're mounting it corner to corner. in the lathe, and it's rotating this way. So it's rotating like this. And the interesting thing about that is it allows for a lot of different forms, but we'll talk about grain direction in a second, which it provides an interesting challenge. One of the things that I found is that I like to, when I start turning a particular form, is look at what are all the different possibilities of that. And so I think, well, after Jimmy Clues was here last year, I decided to try exploring that a little bit more. And so I made a double tri-corner bowl with a double tri-corner handle on the lid. And let's see, I've made, napkin rings that way. And here was one with a hollow form in it. Okay, yeah. And then last month I made this clock. I started putting captive rings on them. And that was kind of fun. So actually now I'm getting a little tired of those. but I'm going to do one more today, and then my wife hopes I'm going to stop making them for a while. But so we're going to start out, when we talk about the grain direction on this, now, my picture went away. That's good, because it was a terrible drawing. So maybe somebody just thought it was scribble. But when we're turning this in this direction, the grain, instead of going parallel or perpendicular to the lathe, is going at a 45-degree angle, which presents some interesting challenges. So we start out, and how do we mount this thing? Well, just place it inside the spindle of the lathe, and also take the point out of your live center, and just put those corners in there. Now, there is a wonderful company called Rubber Chucky that makes a lot of things, and I saw online that they actually now make a set of centers that will hold this in this position. For all their other wonderful products, I think that one's kind of a waste of money because you can just do this. And I don't really, maybe if you were doing it in production, it might be a time saver, I don't know. But there is one advantage of this. Since this is just a friction drive, if you do get a minor catch, it's probably just going to stop the wood and not, completely blow it up. So there is that advantage. So I've heard that people have done that. So let's see. So yeah, we're just doing this as a friction mount. And what I usually do is I make a pencil mark on my tool rest and for each of these corners and try to line that up as close as I can. It never seems to come out quite perfect, but it's close enough. And I always start by making this cove in the middle. So that's what I'm going to start with. And here goes. And probably most of you, if not everybody, knows I'm not a professional turner. Secret to success is lowered expectations. Oh. Okay. And I think I just took off a corner. It's okay, I have a backup. Okay. Now what I'm aiming for here, as I cut into here, I want to create actually a flat spot in the middle because I want to texture the outside of the ring. So I'm going to keep cutting in from the sides. Pardon? Oh, this is just this is just a 3/8 inch bowl gouge, and I just grind it with a Wolverine jig. So standard, yeah. Mhm. Fine. That's the advantage of not having those cup centers. So I've heard. That's what we're doing here. Right. Yeah, I'm almost there. It's just a friction drive, right? It's just stuck. One point is stuck um, into the spindle. The other point is stuck into a tail center with no point in the middle. No, no, just put the corners in there. Yeah, so it's, I just, where's that, where's that block? Take these corners, put that one in tailstock, that one into the headstock, and it's ready to go. As I say, they do have those cup centers, I guess, from Rubber Chucky that they do, actually hold that in that shape. But I don't think that that's really necessary because we actually don't use this for very long either. Take one. Let's just check how I'm doing here. Leave that there. Okay, at this point, I'm going to take a parting tool. I'm going to define this ring. Now, if I weren't making the captive ring, I'd just continue making a cove all the way down into there. And actually, one cool thing that I have also tried is just making that cove and then using a texturing tool to kind of create some texture right in the middle of that, which is kind of cool. Okay. So having defined that ring, I'm going to back my tool rest up here and grab a texturing tool and just put a little texture on the outside of the ring. It's kind of fun to do these with a spiraling tool too, but it seems to take longer, and in the interest of time, I thought I'd just do the texture. See what that looks like. Oh, I kind of like that. Can you see it, or? Yeah, so we've got texture there. Now what I need to do is give myself a little more clearance in order to get in here and cut that ring. So I'm going to go to a 1/4-inch spindle gouge, again just with the standard standard grind, a Wolverine jig grind. Okay. And by the way, um, I think one of the best values for tools, especially for those of us who are not professionals, but very good tools, these artisan tools that come from craft supplies, they're Henry Taylor tools, not quite as polished as their normal tools, but still very high quality, good steel, and substantially cheaper. So I'm kind of a fan of those. And if you're trying to build your tool collection and don't have a ton of money, these are good tools. Okay, let's see. Okay, so still got a little texture there in the middle, rounded that off a bit. Any questions at this point? Oh, well, when I'm, here, I'm actually trying to watch up here for the most part, so that I can see, for example, when I was particularly when I was cutting with the parting tool, I wanted to make sure that I got these troughs both about the same depth, and so I was looking up here to do that. So now, and speaking of cheap tools, sometimes cheap tools are okay. This is a Benji's Best from Penn State, and for a long time I kind of resisted buying their tools, but sometimes they are good for certain purposes. This is a captive ring tool, and I have no doubt that there are people here that could cut under this with a skew. I don't. Okay. Oh. Okay. So I think this is basically just a skew chisel with a hole drilled in it and then ground down to this. And this allows me to go, especially with these wings being in the way, it allows me to go underneath this ring. I think it'd be pretty difficult to get a skew chisel in there to do that. And there might be other ways to do it, and as I say, there might be other people that can do that, but I don't think I'm one of them. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that. Now, at this point, like I say, you don't have to do a captive ring, but why not? And I think my tool rest is a little low for this. This lathe is a little high for me, not one of those tall guys, but this tool needs to be pretty much on level and right on the tool rest. I think that might be too high. Well, yeah, we could try it. Might work. Thank you, Marty. I just got to try not to step off of it, you know.
Well, that's why it's so big. All right, step back.
Off of there. Okay. Yeah, I think that might be a little better. Okay. Continuing with captive ring here. And just work this in a little bit at a time from each side. There we go. One captive ring. And so then you're left with a pretty rough surface down underneath here. And where did my tape go? Oh, there it is. So what I do in order to complete this is use a little of the ubiquitous blue tape to fasten this off to one side and then the other to cut that cove in the middle. And it actually always seems to take 3 cuts, at least for me, to do that, to get that smooth in the middle. First person when I went to one of the symposiums and they had Rudy Lopez, who's one of my favorite turners as well, and he was the first person I saw using copious amounts of tape to hold things in place, and it was kind of an eye-opener for me to see, and that was when I was, just pretty new to this, so, let's see, can I get in there with this one? Yeah. And Rudy was here demonstrating for our club a couple years ago, and I had the opportunity to take a class from him, which was really wonderful. Let's see, can I kind of running off the platform here. Now this is one point you want to really be careful not to hit that ring. Okay. And then tape it to the other side. See how Now, actually, this platform does bring up another thing that I was meaning to talk about. A couple of years ago at the symposium in Loveland, I saw Eric Lofstrom. He's a turner out of Seattle. And he's very much into all the body mechanics of turning. And he talks about every cut starting from your feet. And so he made me really think a lot about balance at the lathe. And not that I always do it right. I found myself often somewhere in the middle of a cut thinking, oh, I should have thought about where my feet are. So that's something to try and be aware of. Or Eric had us doing all these balance exercises in the room. And at the time, I had just had a foot surgery, and I was recovering from that. And Tom Worsing was standing next to me in one of these, and I almost fell on him. Eric also just recently, in the latest AAW magazine, he had an article about carpal tunnel syndrome and a couple of stretches that seemed to help. I don't think I actually have carpal tunnel, but I definitely have some arthritis problems. And he does a stretch like this, and no, I'm not praying, and also like this, to stretch out the wrists, and he says to stop and do that periodically while you're turning, and it seems to help. Now, one question with this platform, it's there. That might be better. Yeah, I won't be doing much down at this end of the lathe. Much better. So now I can actually set my feet in the proper position. Now, if you break off your captive ring, you can always do this. Just go into the center. And then you can take your texturing tool. No, we're not going to glue it. I'll give you another alternative in just a minute. Okay. This is kind of a cool thing that you can do with this. Straight up and down. Yeah, if you tried to tilt that in there, it would be catching all over the place. Plus, actually, the texturing tool, the spiraling wheels can go at different angles. The texturing tool, they pretty much say to do it straight up and down. Now, if I had more room, I also like to sometimes burnish that. Now, this obviously won't fit in there, but I'll burnish that with the back of the handle, or else with some shavings. Now, in a minute, I'm going to cheat, because this is my first demo. So, but for right now, I want to show you the next step in this, assuming that we still had our captive ring, would be to define my wings here and create a tenon to put in the chuck. Yes, I am going to use a chuck. So, I'm going to set this parallel to the edge of that rim there. Let's see, yeah. And I want to take very light cuts because if you catch here, it can actually splinter out all the way across and destroy this rim right here, which I've already destroyed, but we're not going to worry about that for right now. Because like I said, I'm going to cheat. And I want to keep good downward pressure on the tool rest, but very, very light pressure on the wood. You know how many wood turners it takes to change a light bulb? Just one, but then a bunch of more have to stand around and talk about how much better Raffin would have done it.
Tell me if the speed plays a part in how easy it is to cut or how hard it is to cut with that.
I think more speed generally helps up to a point. Anytime you're turning a lot of air, I think the faster you're turning, the closer it's going to behave to a solid piece of wood. On these, I don't go for super fast speed. I was turning some of them faster, and I was finding I was having some problems. But at this point, I'm on the low speed range on this lathe, which I think the top is around 1,200 RPM. So I'm staying in that 1,000 to 1,200 range, and I think it does help to have if you go too slow, you've just got too much air in between or too much time in between cuts. So. As I'm getting out here, I have to decide just how thin I want to make these wings. Now, another design consideration is what shape you want these. You can make these have a consistent thickness all the way around. In some ways, I kind of like to leave it a little thicker in the middle, sort of a smile profile, as opposed to being perfectly parallel all the way. But I definitely want, before I start forming my tenon, I want to get past these edges here. And I think I'm going to form my tenon at about this level here. So start to remove some of this waste over here. Let's just see. Go a little lower on that. Going for about a 2-inch tenon because I have brought a chuck with 2-inch jaws. Now it's interesting, there seems to be, there's always a lot of debate, the whole idea of whether your tenon should conform to your jaws pretty much exactly, or if the jaws can be open more or whatever. Like Keith, his is, what's the maximum size of the jaws, what's the minimum size? And other people are, let's try and get that perfect circle. I tend to go more towards the perfect circle, but I'm not too picky about it, especially after working with Keith. He didn't care if, he'd expand those jaws as far as they'd go, and it always seemed to work for him. So now let's see how. Yeah, that'll work. And this was a Jimmy Clues thing. Again, Penn State, Benji's Best. This is a $10 parting tool. You should just grind that to the angle of your chuck and use that for no other purpose than to make your tenon. Just check that. That'll work. And now it's time to get rid of all this waste here. And what I do here is just to cut this down to a small cone. But because of the grain direction on these things, you don't want to carry that too far. And at this point, if I wasn't going to cheat, I would pick up this little saw and take that little bit of waste off and turn this around and put it in my tenon. Or put it into my chuck. But nobody saw that, right? There it is. Yeah, it was just an optical illusion when that blew up. Yeah. I wanted to be able to demonstrate that texturing, so I took it out of there and then put it back. Yeah. Okay, so. Actually, that's only the second one I've ever blown up. Of course, I had to do it in my demo, right? Well, yeah. But who's counting? Oh, okay. Who asked you, Marty? Okay, so mounted it in the chuck. I'm still going to bring my tailstock back up because I can. Yeah, I would have. Actually, that's a good question. I probably should have answered that. Yes, I would have. I would have done some both hand sanding and also one thing I really like. These are made by Festool, and they're foam-backed sandpaper, and I can get into things like this. And actually, if you kind of fold it back like this, you can sand up the wing a bit without getting into too much trouble, and I can even get a little bit underneath that ring, all that kind of stuff. Now, because of those wings. Now, I also sometimes I take these little discs, sanding discs, and I'll kind of loop them underneath the ring and use the ring to sand. And so you can really get a smoother finish on the inside of there. And then a lot of times when I'm finished, actually, for these wings, I'll take a 1-inch sanding disc and just mount that in a Jacob's chuck and sand these things over here. To get rid of it. I've heard people sometimes have tool marks there. I've been told. It's all done, the finishing that I do by hand. I don't think, you can't really, I think you'd get in trouble trying to friction polish those wings. I think I would get in trouble. Mm-hmm. It actually does, you can round those off too if you break one off and you want to save the piece. Doesn't look too bad, and if you don't tell anybody you were intending to make them sharp. Okay. Oh, yeah. So what I'm going to do now is define my upper wings here, and hopefully do a better job than I did on, well, actually the lower wings didn't come out too bad with the other part. At this point, I kind of have to decide what is it I'm going to make with this thing. I've already decided in advance that I'm going to make it into a tea light holder, so I am going to end up just drilling a hole in it. But if I were making a bowl, I'd have to decide, well, just how far in do I want to go with this? If I was doing something like that hollow form, what do I want to leave of this waste up here? So it is a point of design consideration at that point. And this seems appropriate at this time. I haven't had written in a quote in here. Actually, I saw this at it was in a quilting expo, and it's creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes. Art is deciding which ones to keep. Okay. Now, one thing that Keith had pointed out to me at the time was that I was tending to keep my flute way too closed. So I've been trying to work at opening up my flute. Occasionally that gets me in trouble. Now, all of this up here is waste. So, but we can't get too aggressive with it or we will get a lot of chipping. That was a little bit too much of a cut there. Now at this point I'm trying to get out all the way out to the ends of those wings without taking too much meat out of the middle, so I still have some support. Hold your breath. Now I can start working a little more towards the middle. And when Marty asked earlier about speed, And of course, that always depends on who you talk to. If it's Jimmy Clues, what's the proper speed? Well, how fast does the lathe go? Whereas, got to take a chance class with Alan Lacer not too long ago, and he's kind of a crusader of against speed. He's of the speed kills school. Let's just stop and see how we're doing here. Not bad. Okay, I'll still keep working towards the center a little bit more here. While I'm doing this, I just want to say it was really nice to see so many people participating in show and tell this month. A lot of times it seems like we have a lot of the same people, and it really is something you should do. There's not, because there's no risk in it, you know. Nobody's going to come down on you for having a piece that's not perfect, because none of us are perfect. And I think we exist as a club to help each other, help us all become better turners. So, by all means, you know, bring a piece in. I know when I first started coming to the club, it took me a little while to get up the courage to bring a piece in for show and tell. And I brought in 2 bowls, and of course, I didn't have any idea who he was at that point, but the demonstrator that month was none other than Glenn Lucas, and they asked him to do a critique, and the first thing he does is walk over and pick up my bowls. And for anybody who doesn't know, Glenn Lucas is one of the premier bowl makers in the world, and of course, he was very gracious. He picked up my bowls, and he was complimentary where he could be, which, and offered some really helpful suggestions, which I found very constructive. And he was never insulting or in any way, you know, condescending about it, because he knows the difference between. He knows that he's Glenn Lucas and I'm not. So now this waist here, I can't actually take the whole thing off because the piece is held securely in the chuck. You notice I'm leaving a little rim here that I will work on later to have a little rim for my candle. And there it goes. Okay, next step is we're going to drill. Okay. Yeah, I think Betty might have a problem with. I won't show them to her. I'll keep them in the shop. They won't. Well, we've lasted 42 years. I think maybe we can survive this as well. Oh, she loves sanding them. Yeah. It's everybody's favorite part of woodworking is, yeah. Okay. Now for drilling, especially with this, I'm using a 1 5/8 inch drill bit because your typical T-light is about 1.5 inches, but it'll fit really tight in there if you make 1.5 inch holes. Probably 1.16 and 5 or 9/16 would be ideal, but I don't have one, so 1 5/8 it is. Done. And they're also about 3/4 of an inch tall. So I'm going to drill in about 5/8 actually. And the reason for that is then I can clean out the bottom and not have that little hole that the spur of the bit makes in there. And I think that's about where I want to be. This was about 3 1/4 inches square. I've used all different sizes. I've used them, made them as big as like 5 inches, and with some of those handles, I've used down to 1 inch or 1.25 inches. So it really can be any size. If I'm making the napkin rings, actually this is a blank for a napkin ring. So yeah, it's about 2 1/4, I think, because I found that a 1 1/4 inch hole is about the right size for a napkin. And actually, the cool thing I can do with these is then I have a set of long jaws that have about 1.5 inch grip on there. So I'll make a tenon about 1.5 inches, and then when I get one side of it done, I'll actually just drill right through, and I still have my tenon to hold it, but I've got the hole for the napkin ring, and then I can turn it around on a jam chuck and finish off the bottom on it. Okay, so let's take this guy out of here. And next thing I want to do is take a spindle gouge and just kind of clean up that rim for the candle holder. kind of define that there. I'm going to leave that kind of like that little bezel look. And then going to take a box scraper. And again, this is a Benji's Best. You know, and this is one thing that I find is a good idea. If you're experimenting with maybe a tool that you don't know that you're going to use a lot, or if you're experimenting with maybe a different grind or something like that, go out and buy a cheap tool. I know, like, for example, I do mostly all jig sharpening on my gouges, but Keith was very much, you know, of the platform sharpening 40-40 grind school. And, oh, I don't like that cut. I have to fix that. And so I decided to wanted to try to learn that, and I still don't feel like I'm there, but I just bought some Penn State tools, and if you pay $14 for a spindle gouge and you grind it away practicing, what have you lost? You know, $14, yeah. And or same thing with, you know, you can get a bowl gouge from them for $20. So grind away at it and save your you know, crown and Sorby tools, and then when you get good at it, start doing those. Yeah, I don't like that. Yeah, that's better. And a little fuzz there to clean up. Now, if you do have some tool marks out here on these wings, you might be tempted to try scraping those. Don't. The results will not be good. Cindy Drozda sells these lights. I really like them. And by the way, on this box scraper, this angle here should be 90 degrees. But I grind just a little bit of a radius on there so I can get into the bottom and go across it and make it smooth, as opposed to having this edge perfectly square. Thank you. The things you forget when you're demonstrating for the first time. Yes. Pardon? Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So at this point, there are any number of things I could do here. I think I will do one thing, one little decorative thing, and that's I'm going to take a point tool and I'm going to make a little line just outside of this rim, just for a little decoration. Again, you could probably even do, do a little texture in here somewhere, set it off with some points, any number of things. Okay, so now it's time to turn this thing around and finish it. This is reminding me why, oh, there it is. I have a magnet right here. My chuck key stays right there all the time. So that chuck needs to come off. I could make a jam chuck, but since this is a standard size, what I'm going to do in this case is, and this was something else that Keith talked about doing, was taking these pin jaws and I turned a piece of PVC that just slides over there, but I split it, and so I can take this, slide it right over that, open up the jaws. Okay. Yep. Yeah, if you put 2 slots, it falls off. Asking for a friend. Okay? Okay. Or you could do 4, have 1 for each draw. Yeah. Well, it seems to work fine with just 1. Now, since, now this is again talking about design considerations, since this is a tea light holder, I pretty much can do anything I want on the bottom of this. I could just, curve it all the way in. I kind of like to leave a little bit of a bowl on the bottom, even though it isn't really a bowl. Where it gets a little tricky with these, if you're doing a bowl and you really want to get that bottom a consistent wall thickness, it's hard to measure that on these things because of the way these wings are going. So a lot of times it seems like you kind of have to guess. I've been trying to figure out I think there are some other ways I could do it, but haven't gotten there yet. So I usually just guess. Okay, so. And actually, I can bring up my tailstock again. So I will. I happen to like the Nova Live Center because they have all kinds of different options of what you can put in here. Different cones and all of that, including they even have an attachment where you can put a bolt or a screw in there, form a piece of wood to any shape you need, and put that on there too. So it comes with quite an array of different points. Yeah. Yeah. Nope. At least I haven't so far. You know, the rule is anything can go wrong and could go wrong, and it probably will if it's a demo. Try to center that a little bit better. From my experience, a lot of times these things don't turn around quite perfectly. But yeah. Well, maybe I won't use the tailstock this time. It is a good idea whenever you can to use it, but in this case, can probably get away without it. There could be. No, it's gripped on there pretty tight, but I think one more try and then it's just going to be close enough for jazz. We're going to call that close enough for today. And take this bad boy out of here. I do really prefer to have that tailstock support, but under the circumstances, I guess we'll go with it this way. Now, one of the things I'm not doing in this demo, and I realize it is a required element for every demonstrator, is that at some point you're supposed to move the tool rest while saying, do not move the tool rest while the lathe is running. And I'm not doing that because of all these wings and things, so sorry. If you have to deduct points for that, that's okay. Yeah. The only, actually, Rudy Lopez is one of the few that I've ever seen that always turns off the lathe before, and that's maybe because he does so many things with wings. If I were just doing, if I had, carved a bowl out of the other side, I would really be concerned about where the bottom of that bowl is. I wanted to, obviously it wouldn't be anywhere near this deep, but I did want to give myself a little bit easier project for my first demo. I'm just going to make a slight dome on the bottom. Probably, I'd say, a ½ inch smaller diameter than it is now. So. And we are approaching the finish line, folks. I hear a sigh of relief. I almost did it. Now I'm going to finish this little dome by scraping it with a skew. Now I need that tool rest a little bit higher. Give it a little bit of definition here. And this portion of it I actually could sand on the lathe, particularly using those 2-inch discs. I'm going to make one more cut with my spindle gouge here, if I can find it, just to clean up. One more cut, yep. This one isn't that scary. Kind of find that bevel with the heel of the tool. Go in like that. And actually, because this thing is a little out of balance, this is never going to really, I might be able to do that with a bowl gouge. One more cut. Back to my skew. And just kind of clean that up a little bit. And a couple of decorative lines, give you a place to sign it. And for the purposes of my first demo, we're going to call that done. Thank you so much. I'm really pleased that so many people showed up and that I didn't screw up too badly, I don't think. But it was fun. It was my first demo ever. I hope it's not my last. And once again, I want to say thanks to this club for giving me so many opportunities to study with great turners and to be in the company of all these great turners. It's really quite flattering. And I'll close with one more quote from years ago. I found, actually it was a metal worker who was getting up there in the years and was still very, very active in his metal art. And he said, it's probably hard to read my terrible handwriting, but life is short, art is long, get busy.